Good afternoon, or morning, depending on where you are. I am Lori R. King, and if you are here, I hope you are seeing this. I'm sure that someone will let me know. If not, anyone who has my text, send me a text if I'm not there. We are talking today about the 30th anniversary of The Beekeeper's Apprentice. And I was extremely pleased when I asked my publisher, Picador, if they would send me a few copies of the books. I offered to pay, but they sent them to me for nothing. If they would send me some copies that I could give to the people who are going to be speaking at the various events that we're planning this year. And I was extremely happy when I got actually the new edition, which, let's see if we can see that. The 30th anniversary edition. So there it is. Absolutely indistinguishable from the 25th anniversary edition. Only slightly different from the 20th anniversary edition. So I think we're waiting until 50 before we hit anything different. But I love the cover, so I'm glad they didn't change that. So I thought I would talk to you a little about The Beekeeper's Apprentice and Mary Russell and how I came to write it and her. And I have a few questions that people had put up beforehand, and I have one of our good friends, we call her the Hive Mom, over on the Beekeepers Apprentices group here on Facebook. Karen is going to be watching the feed here, because if I try and see your questions as they go past, I'm never going to do anything other than read questions. So Karen is going to catch the questions and send them to me on a text, and then I will. So after I've talked for a bit and given a bit of show and tell, I will turn it over to you guys. I was 15 when I first met Sherlock Holmes. 15 years old, with my nose in a book as I walked the Sussex Downs, and nearly stepped on him. In my defense, I must say it was an engrossing book, and it was very rare to come across another person in that particular part of the world in that war year of 1915. In my 7 weeks of peripatetic reading amongst the sheep, which tended to move out of my way, and the gorse bushes, to which I had painfully developed an instinctive awareness, I had never before stepped on a person. And I think, as you probably know, that's how the book begins. How the book began was when I was a young mom, and I came across a picture recently that I thought would amuse you. I wrote the first part of The Beekeeper's Apprentice in 1987, and when my older child, my daughter, was in school, and my son had just gone into preschool 3 whole mornings a week, and so I had almost 9 hours a week all to myself. And I sat down and wrote those words that I just read you, that remained almost unchanged over all the drafts and edits and changes that happened. Almost unchanged. But this is me in the year that it was published, not the year it was written, the year it was published. An article in the local paper, and I'm sitting in front of my wood stove with my Abyssinian cat in my lap, and the writing clipboard that I used, which I still have somewhere, one of those oversized artist clipboards that they have. And I I wrote in longhand um, on on usually legal sheets that were either this color, kind of a yellowy brown, or depending on what country I was working in, quite a few of my notes are like this, which are, can you tell the difference? My show and tell needs some work here. You can see they are slightly different. This being, oh, you can't really see. This is 8.5 by 11, and this is the standard English size. So as you can see, I was working on it partly in England. The first name for the book was let's see, The Segregation of the Queen. In Arthur Conan Doyle's story, His Last Bow, Holmes mentions that he is working on a book on beekeeping with some notes upon the segregation of the queen. Well, in 1987, when I sat down to write this, I was not a Sherlockian. I had not read the Sherlock Holmes stories since whatever it is you read in high school, which was probably Hound of the Baskervilles and Spotted Band. Anyway, I don't remember. I don't remember which ones I had, which I had tucked in the far back of my brain. But in 1987, there was a series of the Jeremy Brett programs from BBC, and they were on PBS Masterpiece Theater or Masterpiece Mystery. The one that began with the lady on the fainting couch. Oh, the gory sketches on it, and those stories, which I watched over at my mother's house once a week, made me think about how much credit gentlemen detectives got by their admirers. So that when Watson sees Holmes figuring stuff out, it just baffles him. It astonishes him. He's filled with awe, and I couldn't help thinking, if that were a woman, her thoughts would be dismissed as being women's intuition and guesses. So I think that's kind of where the idea of Mary Russell came from. I wanted it to be a sort of coming of age story. I wanted to see her as a young mind. I wanted her to meet him, because it's always more interesting when you have two characters who are very similar, but you put them next to each other instead of completely separate. So that's where Russell came from, was the stories on public television. All praise to public television. And the sort of vague sense from a young mother that there may be more out there than just cleaning up after small kids. So Mary Russell came along as a young female feminist, obviously, 20th century version of the Great Detective. And their similarities bring them together, and their differences, I think, make them interesting together. So that's where Russell came from. She's an improved version of Holmes. Don't tell the Sherlockians. So I wrote The Beekeeper's Apprentice as It was probably under 300 pages, my first draft. It wasn't really a novel. It was a series of cases that were glued together. The rewrites that I did were basically trying to make it into a novel, so that the idea that you had someone behind the the kidnapping case of Jessica, who then reappears at the end and has been the silent villain all the way through it. That came with the rewrite because it obviously didn't work. It worked for Conan Doyle because he was writing short stories. I wasn't writing short stories, I was trying to write a novel, and it wasn't a novel, it was a series of cases. But when I started working in the idea of the person who became Patricia Donlevy and is behind a number of things, it started to become a novel. And that's where I was probably the following spring. And I had written, I was playing around with some other ideas too. I started what became the third one after they became partners, married partners. And when those didn't sell, because I didn't have an agent, I was just sending them in, and that's a really great way of getting completely ignored by the publishing world. I started writing a third book that had to do with a detective in San Francisco in the modern era and a much more contemporary feel to it. And as luck would have it, that was the one that sold first. And as it was headed towards publication, my dear editor at St. Martin's Press said, "So what else do you have?" And I, being a young mother, didn't have a whole lot of time free to turn out a book in the next 6 months. So I said, well, I have this book that we've kind of had a couple people sniff at, but I haven't sold it yet. Would you be interested? So I sent it in to my beloved editor, Ruth Cavan, and she fell in love with Mary Russell, and that's how things began. So with the Russell stuff, this is how it first appeared in. They used to actually do actual hard paper catalogs that you'd get, and this one is for winter 1994. And here is the page for and I have to show you the cover. Some of you have seen this, many of you have seen this before, but the original cover was supposed to be that. So you have, little shy Mary Russell with a bow in her hair and big manly pipe smoking Sherlock Holmes and flocked wallpaper in the background, and you have a little bee up in the corner, and it says, "On the Segregation of the Queen," which is the subtitle that we chose. And I looked at it and I said, "Oh, no, please." And I would say that this was the worst cover I've ever had, except I had one recently that a few of you have seen, and I'm not going to show the rest of you because it was really it's sort of modernist cosplay in London for a book that's set in Paris, and anyway, it just completely baffled me. But this one truly was so dreadful that even I, a brand new author, had to say to them, "Please don't do this to me." So fortunately, the advanced reading copy came out in just that form, and so that none of the early reviewers had their minds set for that book of the flocked wallpaper. Fortunately, because when the actual book came out, it was this one, which quite a few of you know. It's difficult to tell on video, but there's a really interesting outline here of Holmes, and some of the editions, the printing is a little clearer than others, but this is a first edition, and it's just It's just very subtle. And then you have her in there, which no, it doesn't look like her, but that's okay. At least it's not a little girl in flocked wallpaper. It's okay. I could live with that. So that's that's where we started from. The book came out. Uh, I did my first event at my local bookstore, which was called Book Cafe on 41st Avenue in Capitola. And here's a picture of going, I don't know if you can see, the middle line says Laurie King's Wonderful Beekeeper's Apprentice Wednesday. And that's my mother going to the bookstore with me. So I did an event, and that's where we started, is the Beekeeper's Apprentice. From there, 30 years has been really interesting. It's been under a mad variety of covers. St. Martin's Press did the first edition in hardback, but they they decided they didn't want to do the paperback. I think what happened was they gave the first two books to a junior editor to read, and he said, no, we don't want to do these in paperback. So they put the rights up for sale. Bantam Books, my editor at Bantam Books, was one of those who was interested in it, and she ended up driving all over the end of New York State, looking for a copy of The Beekeeper's Apprentice, which by that time was a year old, and nobody would send her one. So she wanted to bid on it, and very fortunately, they won the bid. And so the one that you can see, let's see, behind me, that red cover is their paperback that came out a year or two later. I was extremely fortunate because they were doing summer reading campaigns then. And for any of you who were here for one of these that I did last year for A Grave Talent, which is the Kate Martinelli book, I think I talked a little bit about their summer reading package that they did. But they did a second summer reading package with T-shirts, with an Edward Gorey T-shirt. And on the back is, you can see that, The Beekeeper's Apprentice and two other books. So I was thinking I should do a giveaway of one of these. I think I'll run a giveaway of one of these later in the year, because they're really great fun. I only have the one size, which is adult XL. I don't know if they didn't make any others, but that's what I have. So I'll do a giveaway later in the year. Because it was a great way of having what they call the dump. Those are the things in, remember bookstores? In bookstores that you'd go and you'd have these books facing out, and they usually had a decorative element on the top that the bookstore would fit into there, so it would have that element of the summer reading Edward Gorey thing. And that's how I was launched at first at St. Martin's Press, and then the paperback at what was then St. Martin's Press, and now has my books are Picador, which let's see, where is it? The cover here that I just so love, that cover. Picador is an imprint of St. Martin's Press, so they are now back to doing the paperback. But for a while it was Random House, and it was sold all over the place to other people. We have this. Can you see that kind of greenish cover behind me? Is the one that I think HarperCollins did in England, and then this one is a very rare edition. This one is from Poison Pen Press, which only did a few books. They did like maybe a dozen books altogether in England, just experimenting with the market, and decided that it wasn't feasible to start up a new press in England. So I am one of the few people who was published with Poison Pen Press in England, in the I can't even see what year this is. It says 1994, but that's not what year it was published. Anyway, um, so that's sort of the publication history. We're now in this fabulous cover with the iconic stained glass sort of thing in there. Um, let's see. I also was going to talk a little bit about the writing process that I did. I I wrote the first 7 books or so that I published. I hand wrote, as I said, on legal pad or UK pad, or occasionally remember the kind of dot matrix printers that you got, and sometimes I would write printing out on those. I had a friend who typed things for me because I was such a lousy typist, and she would type things from my incomprehensible notes, and I would then sometimes I would try and retype them, and sometimes she would retype them. So at a certain point they were retyped, but it's really interesting looking at the whole process as it goes along, because I have, the first drafts in pages. They're interspersed with typescript, most of which it looks something like that, so heavily marked up that there's very little of the original page sitting there. But it's interesting because you can watch the way that I was learning to write, and you can watch the development of the characters and the book itself. One of the things that I was very pleased at this past year was that in an attempt to, you tend to save these things, right? I mean, I've got this box that has all these notes and the first editions and the catalog and all the rest of it. Well, what do you do with it? I mean, it sits there in I have a storage space, fortunately, so it's not taking up an entire room, but I've got 30 some books out there, and they all have a box, and they all have these notes, and and they're all very interesting if you're interested in them. But why? So I was in touch with someone who asked me to come and speak to a group in Minnesota, and I had to say I couldn't make it this year. It was just too difficult for me to work it into the schedule. But he happened to say, well, make sure that if you're ever doing your archives that you keep us in mind. And I thought, aha, archives. Surely all this rubbish that I have counts as archives, right? So I wrote back to him, and it ends up that I am going to be packing up all of my multiple boxes of whatnot and sending it off to the University of Minnesota, to the Sherlock Holmes collection there. They have a collection, so I am going to be joining the Sherlock Holmes collection. So if any of you want to do a PhD in Laurie King, that's where that's where you can go. So it'll have things like this. Because this was obviously the days before ebooks, and I tended to have people read books. I would have them printed on two-sided paper and have that kind of binding that goes through, and you can actually treat it like a book. So this first printing that I had, long before we changed the name, has been read by several people and has notes in it from them. And it was at a time when I was in England, and so I put my English address on there. It's the first title, as I said, was The Segregation of the Queen, because that's the subtitle of Holmes' story. I have a letter from my editor, my St. Martin's Press editor, Ruth, to say, I don't think that having the word segregation in the title is good. I think that it needs to be something more positive. So we played around with various ideas and came up with The Beekeeper's Apprentice and used some notes upon the segregation of the queen as its subtitle. So, but I see on here one of the possible titles that we were working with was A Practical Handbook of Detecting, which would have been so confusing. So, anyway. But all this stuff is going to be going to the University of Minnesota, and anyway, I'm very pleased with that. So, let me turn to some of the questions that have come in. I'm trying to think if there's anything that I wanted to say specifically. No. One of the things I meant to mention was that in the catalog copy for the book, The Beekeeper's Apprentice, on the segregation of the Queen by Laurie R. King. The first line of the title of the description is, "In his retirement, the great detective Sherlock Holmes grooms a young woman to follow in his footsteps." And I couldn't help noticing that word, because grooms means a very, very different thing in 2024. But people have forgiven that, and although I do get notices from people saying that they find it a really creepy idea that you have an old man and a young woman, they can go with the grooms thing, but so please ignore the description in the early catalog. So, I have already covered a number of the questions that you guys were so generous as to put on the both the author page here on Facebook and on the Beekeeper's Apprentices group page. So thank you for that. I spoke around. Some of them had to do with Julie. You wanted to know what inspired the character. Sean, you also asked that. Anyway, there were a number of you who asked about inspiring the character. Robin, you said that you have easy access to your tub of stuff accumulated during the writing of the book. Yes, I've shown you a few stuff. Robin also wanted to know if I'm going to be lugging this stuff to... I will mention, those of you who have somehow not noticed it in passing, there are going to be 4 celebration events for the Beekeeper's Apprentice during 2024. The first one is 6 weeks from today, in Santa Cruz, and that one I will almost certainly be lugging my tub of stuff to. I don't think the other ones I will be, simply because it is a tub of stuff and it weighs a ton, and I might bring 1 or 2 things, but that's all. But there will also be, if you are someone who goes to one of the crime conferences, the 3 other events are going to be attached to those the day before. Left Coast Crime in Seattle, Malice Domestic in Washington, D.C., or Bethesda, and BoucherCon, which this year is in Nashville. So if you are interested in the community of Mary Russell and the Beekeeper's Apprentice, go to my website and look at the events there, and there's the various things there. We probably are going to be dropping the price on them. I had to work the price around how many people were going to be signing up, because I had expenses that I had to cover, and I think that we're doing okay with that, so I probably will drop the price. We'll do it so that you don't have to do anything. That price will come back into your account. But anyway, if you're interested, take a look at it and sign up, and if the price changes, you will be refunded. So, oh, and I should also mention that if you are coming to one of the events, there is a chat for each event has a chat on the Facebook group, The Beekeeper's Apprentices. and you're welcome to chime in, to meet up there, to make arrangements for dinner or transport or sharing housing or whatever you have. I just ask you not to put too much personal information there, because it's an open chat, anyone on the group. It's not open to the public, but a Facebook group has 2,000, 3,000 people on it. So don't give us your credit card number in print. Thank you. Let's see. So Robin, that was your question. Let's see. There were other people who asked. Margaret, you captured the voices of Russell and Jessica so well. Were you just around models of that right age at that time, or did you read diaries and stories about those ages, or both? My daughter was at the time, let's see, she would have been 7 when I first wrote it, so much younger. But she would have been a teenager when it was first published, so 14, I guess. And she always has claimed that Mary Russell is based on her. We'll let her think that, but there were always kids around. I have a family that had a lot of variation in ages. My husband's family had a lot of kids who were older and younger, and so it's the kind of voice. And I think that Russell's voice is old for her age anyway. She doesn't sound like a 15-year-old in some ways. So that was easier to write. So, Alice, our beloved Alice. Fandoms have played a huge role in spreading the word about your series. Yes, thank you all. All of you who tell your friends that you love Mary Russell, you are the people who make my career and who make me happy and who make the community what it is. So thank you for that. Mary Russell wasn't well received at first by the Sherlockians. Alice is referring to the fact that when Beekeeper's Apprentice was first published, I think a lot of hardcore Sherlockians thought that I was going to take it in an unpleasant area. I don't know if they envisioned just something really tacky or straight out Sherlockian erotica. But in either case, they really were mistrustful of this king woman who was writing about this apprentice who becomes something more than that to Sherlock Holmes. So when the first 2 or 3 books came out, there was the early days of the internet, and there would be chat groups who would flame me. There were flame wars that erupted. But I was completely unaware of them because I lived at the end of a dirt road, and my internet connection was so feeble. It was one of those, you take the old phone and you put it on the pad and it goes warble, 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 and then you get 2 or 3 minutes of connection before it cuts off. So I didn't do a lot of hanging out on the internet in those days. And by the time I really became aware of the wider Sherlockian community out there, I both had friends on the inside, and I think it had become obvious that not only did I treat Sherlock Holmes with respect, but also Arthur Conan Doyle. So I think that on balance, they saw where I was going with the stories, and though they obviously don't all read me, they don't all approve of me, there are enough of them who do, that it's been a pleasure. Again, at those 4 events that I'm doing, that one of the things I hope to do at several of the events is have conversations with people who are longtime Sherlockians. And in DC, I get to have an on-stage conversation with Peter Blau, my beloved friend Peter Blau, who is the first Sherlockian I ever met. And yet I kept writing them despite who he was. Peter's a dear. Sherlock Holmes has been the center of fandoms for over a century. And what was your reaction to the fact that Mary Russell has become the center of a fandom with fan fiction and readers setting up websites to talk about your books? there, I I am continually tickled by how people react to Mary Russell. Um, I I I never quite know how much to take seriously with their passions, but I've had people tell me that they've done degrees in Oxford because of Mary Russell, that they chose to read theology because of Mary Russell, that they these sweeping decisions in their life because of this fictional, whimsical, silly character that I do. And I think that the community that Alice mentions has been one of the great joys of this whole writing gig that I do. I mean, utterly unexpected, and a continuous pleasure to my mind. That not only the friendships that I have made through it, but to see the friendships between other people that have met each other through the Russell stories. I think that it's an interesting thing that happens in this internet age, that we can come together in some ways that are we would never have done otherwise. So I I again thank you all for shaping that around me. Um, and finally, she asks, circling back to Holmes, um, how and where did I meet and become friends with renowned Sherlockian Les Klinger? Les and I have done several books together. Les Klinger is Mr. Annotator. He's done a number of books that are annotations of various novels, such as Dracula and Frankenstein and um, Good Omens and The Watchmen and all kinds of things. So we've sort of been playing with the idea of an annotated Beekeeper, and he's done 2 chapters of it for that we have in the Russell Companion, I think. But I Les and I can't remember when we actually met. It would have been one of the conferences, probably about Bouchercon, probably the late '90s. Um, and but where and when we met, I couldn't tell you. Peter, I could tell you because it was a dinner in Houston in 1995. But Les has just sort of always been in my life that I remember, and he's an actual member of the Baker Street Irregulars. He invited me to give a paper at their annual dinner on Watson's War Wound, the definitive solution to the question of Dr. Watson in the Conan Doyle stories. Um, Sometimes refers to a wound in his shoulder and sometimes in his leg. And this is a great puzzle to Sherlockians for years and years, until Laurie King wrote the definitive solution of it, that it was a bullet that split because it was made by Afghan tribesmen over a fire at night, and they melted down their bullets, and so the definitive solution to the question. Um, that's it. And if you really have to read that, it's in the Laurie R. King's Sherlock Holmes, which is I think it's an ebook, and you can get it on print on demand. So anyway, so let's see. Karen has given me some questions here, and I will. Martha Ryan wants to know, when will the Mary Russell books be seen I guess that's PBS, on PBS. Uh, I, I, who knows? Um, we did have a really interested party during COVID. It was various problems cropped up, and we finally realized that it wasn't going to work. And it was a pity because I liked the way they were approaching the thing, and it would have been fun to work with them. But but that's at the moment on, on, on the back burner. Um, at least I'm assuming that's what the question is. In PBS doesn't mean in pubs, and so if you want to know when she's going to be seen in pubs, you just have to carry a copy of the book and read it in a pub yourself. So there's the answer. Mary Alice, where can one buy that terrific bee shirt you are wearing? Oh, hi, Mary Alice. This is my official bee shirt. I think this, I think this was a Coldwater Creek. They probably don't sell it anymore, but it was Coldwater Creek, and I wear it for my specific. They're not actually honeybees. I think they're more like bumblebees, but we'll pretend. The closest I could find. Alexandra Vincent. So can we make a claim for Mary to be a Somervillian yet? I think that's where she probably fits best. I, Alexandra, I will let you claim that Mary is from Somerville College. Whether it's Somerville or St. Hilda's, it's hard to know. I mean, I have a soft place in my heart for St. Hilda's since I go to the conference there. I haven't been in years, but I have been to the conference that they run there, and my friend Val McDermott was went there, and I was allowed to use their punts to demonstrate punting to people at the conference. So I have a soft place in my heart for St. Hilda's, but Somerville is also possible. So we should have a poll and vote on it. Alice, you asked me that. Yes. Charlotte Osborne Bensada. When you do literary themes, is it because you have recently read them or because they are books you love? I'm assuming that you mean literary themes in the sense of writing a book set around Kim, for example. Are there any other ones that... Can't remember any other ones. Anyway, I mean, Dashiell Hammett wanders through one of the books, but I can't say that that was a literary book. But yes, I mean, it probably isn't because I've recently read them. It's probably because I have read and loved them. I love the book Kim. I think that there are many problems with the attitudes of people like Rudyard Kipling, but setting those aside for the moment, the book itself is just a gem, and I wanted to write a book set in India, and found that the timing worked for it. That I could. The Kipling book itself was set in the 19th century, but if I moved the characters on through time, I thought I could find a way to make use of him, and so that's where it was. So my my husband was born and raised in India. What was then India is now Pakistan. He was born in Rawalpindi. They lived up and down the area. His family was from St. Thomas's Mount near Madras in the south, and he went to school at up in Simla at St. Thomas's. No, what was the name of the school? Anyway, up in Simla. And so he was Anglo-Indian, born and raised there, moved to England to do his university work after the war. And I had long wanted to write a book set in India for him, and because I traveled there, we went there a couple of times, and I just thought it would be such a fun place to send Russell and Holmes. So and it was great because Noel could help me with the research and with the rude words that I probably left mostly out, but I could write them in the first draft anyway. So that's the literary question. Any chance of a live stream from some of your 4 events this year, possibly for a fee? I don't think we charge for a fee. I think we may try and have one of the... I have a sort of team of people who I've been working with for quite a while who are on the Beekeeper's Apprentices and other things. And I think all of the events will have at least a couple of those people, Karen and John and Alice and Marilee and Sabrina and Aaron, will have will be there. And somebody will have an iPad that we can then open up and just have, a 10-minute, hi everybody conversation during the actual event. We won't be streaming the speakers and the rest of it because that's, it's just more organization than we really can handle. But I'd like to have everybody say hi. So I think we may try and do that. If we are doing that, I will post beforehand to let you all know that we're going to be on, and you can wave at us virtually. So, what does it mean to you to continue to be enjoyed by new generations? Caitlin Papas. It means I'm getting old. Yeah, I have people who were fans. In the early days, I would get fan letters from, and usually long fan letters. And some of those now have kids who are just getting up to the Mary Russell age. So, but it's, in some ways it surprises me because when I go to read The Beekeeper's Apprentice, and I don't reread my stuff much, I really don't. I only notice where it doesn't work, so I don't tend to reread it unless I have to. But when I have to, one of the things I notice, especially in The Beekeeper's Apprentice and the like the two books that follow, is that the pacing of it is not what I would do now. The chapters are interminable. I mean, they go on and on and on, and the sentences, the vocabulary in the sentences are part of Russell's personality. They are her voice. So that doesn't change a huge amount. But just the way the books are put together, I find it surprising that more people are not completely daunted by opening The Beekeeper's Apprentice and finding these solid blocks of typeface. Because normally you have, if you open a book, you have a lot of dialogue in it, and you have, but especially the first part of Beekeeper's Apprentice is heavily first person. And so you have a paragraph, and that's all a paragraph. So I find it interesting that people continue to discover it and be charmed by it, rather than say, oh, this is heavy going. So, Linda Thorson, I am curious about your mystery reading before you began writing novels. I can see you're a fan of Dorothy L. Sayers. Were there others who influenced you? Yeah, Dorothy Sayers, I think, introduced the idea that you can tell a mystery story about interesting things. I mean, you have her character Whimsy is, on the one hand, he's sort of two-dimensional, but you also get the sense that here's a man in a great deal of pain. And to find how she does that, I found really interesting. Some of the Golden Age writers, I adore them. Josephine Tey, I just adore Josephine Tey. Marjorie Allingham, I adore less, but I like her stuff. Ngaio Marsh charms me. But nowadays we like stories that give us some kind of human challenge. We don't like just a puzzle mystery. And some of the puzzle mysteries from the Golden Age are fun to read, but you don't get a sense that you've really inhabited those people's lives. And I think those are a bit more of a challenge for a reader of the Golden Age mysteries. But I love the way those women and a few of the men of the time told stories. I like the way they constructed stories, the wit of them. I just I continually admire and reread with pleasure. Um, Alexander Vincent wants to know when they can bring me back to Oxford. I haven't been traveling a lot. Partly COVID and partly just my body. The various things are giving out in the body. It makes it a lot of work to get around. But it possibly 2025. We'll see. Um, I'm going to be. I have these three events that I'll be flying to, and two possibly three flights for the new book for Lantern's Dance when that comes out in February, which I'm assuming you all know Lantern's Dance will be out in February. So now I've done my show tale. Um, and so, to try and balance my energy, the demands if I have a new book that I'm writing, the responsibility for the environment, to just kind of fly everywhere on planes is you kind of have to think, is that really the right thing to do? Um, and to balance that against just getting out there. So I wrote a blog post a week or so ago, last week. Anyway, talking about just that, in that probably 2024 will be the last year I do a lot of book event travel for various reasons. Because I just figure, 30 years, I've done a lot of travel. And I think that I probably have done my share for the indie booksellers out there of showing up and bringing people to events. So if you want to see me, here's your year. Um, is there anyone you would ideally love to play Holmes and Russell on the silver screen? That's Charles E. Kephart. Um, yeah, I think this question always sort of depends on when it's being asked, isn't it? An actress has to be young enough to be believable for, if not 15, then sort of early 20s. Um, I remember about 20 years ago, somebody suggested Jodie Foster. I said, Jodie Foster's my age, which at the time was about 50. And they said, "Oh yeah, but she reads young." And I thought, okay. So no, not Jodie Foster. Um, she'd be a great Mrs. Hudson, but um, Holmes. I mean, there's been any number of really great Holmes. Picard would have been a great Holmes, but he's getting a little bit long in the tooth. Um, but I think there's a number of actors who would be great fun. So. Um, what was Caitlin Pappas asked me, what was your favorite region that Russell and Holmes visited? Oh man, that's a hard decision. Morocco maybe, Japan, I guess. There've been, yeah, I think either Morocco or Japan would have been top on my list. So go there if you're headed for their footsteps. Um, Jen B asks, I always meant to ask. Hi Jen, I'm glad it's not too early in the morning for you. Um, I always meant to ask if you noticed you changed from first to third person in beekeeping for beginners. Yeah. Um, yes, beekeeping from beginners is from Holmes's point of view. So it's meant to be slightly different. I think I started the Holmes point of view. I think it must have been with locked rooms. And correct me, somebody, if I'm wrong, but because in that Russell is an unreliable narrator, and you have to have somebody who actually sees what's going on correctly. And that was Holmes, and the only way of doing that was to let him have his own voice, which having them both in first person would have been a little confusing. But he's third person, but he has his own sections in there. Whereas always before he would be he'd write her a letter and let her know some clue, or he'd be telling her in dialogue what he had discovered on his section of some investigation. But it was mostly her point of view telling what Holmes was telling her. But in Locked Rooms, you have you have to hear his voice, third person, but you have to see what he's seeing. And obviously for beekeeping for beginners, because it's the meeting from his point of view, that has to follow from his point of view as well. So that's his story. That is a slightly different take on the meeting. So yeah. Oh, and by the way, happy birthday to Sherlock Holmes today. So Russell's birthday was the second. So, but today's Holmes's birthday. And what's next after Lantern's Dance? Yes, Lantern's Dance comes out in February. I am going to be writing probably now through the end of summer. It doesn't have a name yet, but it is a story that starts in France and then will go to England. And Russell is going to encounter her long lost uncle, Jake. So if you've read the short story collection, Mary Russell's War, the story Mary's Christmas has, it's also still up on the website if you wanted an illustrated copy of it. We put some pictures in it. You can download it and print it off from the website it's on the page for the anthology. So if you go onto the Mary Russell's War page, there's a link at the top of that you can see the story. But in that, she talks about her Uncle Jake, whom she loved when she was a child, who was a rogue in the family, and who was responsible for giving her the knife that she has learned to use so well. So it'll be a story about Uncle Jake and all the really naughty things that he's gotten up to since we last saw them. So we're almost at an end here. I wanted to call it off at 2. I just wanted to say thank you all for stopping by. I hope that you enjoy the new book and that you enjoy the community. If you are interested in furthering the community, you can always reach me here at the author page or over on the Beekeepers Apprentices, the group, the Facebook group. They are a great group, and there's more posts than you could possibly imagine that are bee-centered. And if you go over there, you will find bees regularly a part of your life. Let's see, I don't think that there's any business thing that I needed to do, and other than to say thank you for my team, who is a regular. Mary Alice is just checking off. She is my Hollywood agent, so she's the one you ask about all these questions. And my Australian cohort, I'm glad to see you. It's always a tricky thing to figure a time that isn't too late for England or too early for Australia, and is an hour when Lori might actually be able to carry on a conversation. So thank you all so much. This will remain recorded. Feel free to share it with people. And I look forward to seeing you again. I think the next one of these that's scheduled, as I said, there will be something on the 6th of February, just a short one. But the next talk that's scheduled will be through the Beekeepers Apprentices group, and that will be a book group discussion of Lantern's Dance. So, and I think that's anyway. It's the first part of March sometime. So that when you join the Lantern, when you join the Beekeepers Apprentices, you'll find an events page on there. So thank you all so much. I love you all. I wish you a great 2024. I wish you much happy reading, and do keep up the faith, and we will introduce Russell to the world. Bye.